Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Gopi Janavallabha Girivardhari. Jaya Gopi Janavallabha Girivardhari. Yashodanandana Brajajana Randana. Yashodanandana Brajajana Randana. Yamuna Tira Vanachari. Yamuna Tira Vanachari. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Jai Om Ishtapad Paramahansa Purjakacharya Ashtotar Tata Shri Srimad Divine Grace Srila A.C. Bhakti Vedanta Swami Prabhupada Ki Jai. ISKCON BBT Founder Acharya Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Jai Om Ishtapad Paramahansa Purjakacharya Ashtotar Tata Shri Srimad Divine Grace Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur Ki Jai. Ananta Koti Vaishnavini Ki Jai. Namacharya Srila Haridas Thakur Ki Jai. Grantaraj Srimad Bhagavatam Ki Jai. Samaveda Bhaktivinoda Ki Jai. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to Shri Guru and Gauranga. Okay. Narayanam Namaskritya Narang Chaiva Narottamam Devim Saraswatim Vyasam Tato Jayamudiriye. Before reciting the Srimad Bhagavatam, which is our very means of conquest, we should offer our respectful obeisances unto Lord Narayan, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, unto Narayan Rishi, the supremest human being, unto Mother Saraswati, the goddess of learning, unto Srila Vyasadeva, the author, and unto Srila Prabhupada, the translator, commentator, and our spiritual master. Nashta Prayesha Bhadreshu Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya Bhagavatyuttama Shloke Bhakti Bhavati Naishtiki. By regular attendance in classes on Srimad Bhagavatam and by rendering devotional service to the pure devotee, all that is inauspicious within the heart is destroyed almost to nil, and loving devotion to the Supreme Lord, who is glorified in transcendental songs, is established as an irrevocable fact. Ravi, you know how to do the curtains? Yeah. Show Dimitri. You can do it next time. You pull these curtains for me. Okay. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. On this 23rd day of June 2021 in San Diego, we're reading from Srimad Bhagavatam, translation and commentary by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada. We are in Canto 4, the creation of the fourth order. Chapter 31, Narada instructs the Pracetas. Text number 24. Tepi tanmukha niryatam yasho lokamalapaham harir nishamya tatpadam dhyayantas tadgating yayuhu tepitan mukaniryatam yasho lokamalapaham harir nishamya tatpadam dhyayantas tadgating yayuhu tepitan mukaniryatam yasho lokamalapaham hare nishamya tadparam dhyayantas tadgatim yayuhu tepitan mukaniryatam yasho lokamalapaham hare nishamya tadparam dhyayantas tadgatim yayuhu. Tepitan mukaniryatam yasho lokamalapaham hare nishamya tadparam dhyayantas tadgatim yayuhu. Tepitan mukaniryatam yasho lokamalapaham hare nishamya tadparam dhyayantas tadgatim yayuhu. Tepitan mukaniryatam yasho lokamalapaham hare nishamya tadparam dhyayantas tadgatim yayuhu. Tepitan mukaniryatam yasho lokamalapaham hare nishamya tadparam dhyayantas tadgatim yayuhu. Tepitan mukaniryatam yasho lokamalapaham hare nishamya tadparam dhyayantas tadgatim yayuhu. Did you do? Tepitan mukaniryatam yasho lokamalapaham hare nishamya tadparam dhyayantas tadgatim yayuhu. Tepitan mukaniryatam yasho lokamalapaham hare nishamya tadparam dhyayantas tadgatim yayuhu. Word by word meanings. Te, the Pracetas, api, oh, I'm sorry. Te, go ahead. Oh, the Pracetas, api, also. Tat, of Narada. Mukha, from the mouth. Niryatam, gone forth. Yashaha, glorification. Loka, of the world. Mala, sins. Apaham, destroying. Harehe, of Lord Hari. Nishamya, having heard. Tat, of the Lord. Padam, feet. Dhyayantaha, meditating upon. Tatkatim, unto his abode. Yayuhu, went. Translation. So this is Pracetas, describing the Pracetas. Hearing from Narada's mouth the glories of the Lord, which vanquished all the ill fortune of the world, the Pracetas also became attached to the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Meditating on his lotus feet, on the Personality of God as lotus feet, they advanced to the ultimate destination. Purport. Here it is seen that by hearing the glories of the Lord from a realized devotee, the Pracetas easily attained strong attachment for the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Then, meditating on the lotus feet of the Supreme Lord at the end of their lives, they advanced to the ultimate goal, Vishnu Loka. It is sure and certain that anyone who always hears the glories of the Lord and thinks of his lotus feet will reach that supreme destination. As Krishna says in the Bhagavad Gita 1865, I'll say, you say, Manmana bhava mad bhakto madhyaji mang namaskuru mame vaishyasi satyam te patijane priyosi me. Always think of me and become my devotee. Worship me and offer your homage unto me. Thus you will come to me without fail. I promise you this because you are my very dear friend. Om jnana timirandasya jnanandana shalakaya chakshu unmidatam mena tasmai shri gurave namaha. I was born in the darkest of ignorance, but my spiritual master Srila Prabhupada opened my eyes with the torchlight of knowledge. I offer my humble obeisance unto him and all members of Sri Parampara, this cyclic succession. So, we've almost come to the end of this pastime of Narada instructing the Pracetas, and we've also almost come to the end of the entire fourth canto. A few more verses, and we'll also come to the end of the instructions of Maitreya to Vidura. So this is quite a point in the Bhagavatam. So I reviewed this whole pastime, and I found it very interesting that the Pracetas, they got so much good instruction. You know, Shiva kind of arranged to be able to meet them. You know, that they would run into him back when they first was sent out by their father, Prachinabharhi, to perform austerities to prepare for being progenitors, populating the universe. So along the way, they meet Lord Shiva, and he speaks to him in this wonderful song of Lord Shiva. I can't resist recalling how I first read that. This was one of the first proofreading jobs I ever had, meditating on the song of Lord Shiva. And it says right near the beginning, anyone who chants this, gets all these benedictions, I think before it even comes. And so I started working on it, meditating on it. So it's a song of pure devotion. I mean, this is Lord Shiva praying, Padashadat Padma Palacha Roshisha, when will I see the lotus feet of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, which are just like the flower growing in the Sharad season, So it's pure devotion. And they're enjoined to sing this song, to meditate on it, while performing severe austerities within the ocean, within the water, which they proceed to do for 10,000 years. And it's quite remarkable. Obviously not, this must be obviously previous age. So they did that, and then they get the darshan of Lord Narayan. He comes down after all of this austerity and chanting. He appears before them, and of course they offer their obeisance, they glorify him like anything. And then they ask for a benediction from him, if you recall. He offers them benedictions, and they ask for benedictions. And I noted this. I made a few notes here, if you'll allow me. So here's the benediction they ask. I'll spare the Sanskrit. Dear Lord, as long as we have to remain within this material world due to our material contamination and wander from one type of body to another, and from one planet to another, we pray that we may associate with those who are engaged in discussing your pastimes. We pray for this benediction life after life, in different bodily forms and on different planets. So, this is what they're praying for after all. They're not praying for anything material. They're praying for pure devotion. And then the very next verse is a very famous verse. which is Tulyama lavenapi naswagam napunarbhavam bhagavat sangi sangasya martyanam kimutashishaha. This appears 3 times in the Bhagavatam, once with a slight variation in wording, but the same meaning. So it means it's a very important verse. Even a moment's association with a pure devotee cannot be compared to being transferred to the heavenly planets or even merging into the Brahman effulgence in complete liberation. For living entities who are destined to give up the body and die, association with pure devotees is the highest benediction. So they're asking for association of devotees who are always hearing and chanting, and ideally there'll be these pure devotees, because even one moment's association. So then Narayan, he praises them, and then he says, finally, whatever benediction you asked for will be fulfilled. So then what happens? They come out of the water after all this time, and they're ready to do their duty. They're purified and they've had the darshan. But immediately they see the whole world has been overgrown with trees, and they become extremely angry. And they start burning with their mystic power. They start burning all the trees, turning them all to ash. And this is not going to do. So Brahma comes down, pacifies them, stops them, and they're encouraged to. There's a daughter. Was it Pramlocha? Who's the daughter from the heavenly planet? She's been taken care of by the trees. And Brahma says, you should marry this girl and, proceed with the duty of populating the universe, which they do. And so they give birth to Daksha. Daksha is reborn, right? And he's expert at propagating generations. He had a run-in with Shiva. We know that he was cursed. He lost his head. He had to be reborn. So now this is his rebirth. And so the population starts to go on. And the Pracetas are married to this girl, and they get absorbed in this family life. So what happens is, I've just been witnessing after this time, Narada Muni comes down, right, and gives them instruction again. So I'm going to skip to that point and kind of meditate on this whole thing. So what the Pracetas tell Narada Muni when he comes, after offering him all respects and bowing down, and very fortunate. O Master, may we inform you that because of our being overly attached to family affairs, we almost forgot the instructions we received from Lord Shiva and Lord Vishnu. So they had both the darshan of Lord Shiva, who gave him this wonderful prayer and song, which they chanted for 10,000 years, got the darshan of Lord Narayan, got his benediction that they would have association of devotees. But then when they came out and they got entangled in the family life. So they're praying now that we almost forgot the instructions. So they need further instruction from Narada Muni, and then he gives them this instruction. And I'd like to focus on a few of those verses, and I made a few notes here. So Narada Muni, there's some very important verses in these instructions. I listened to this class online. I was back home, doing my marathon. I was taking breakfast. And this verse is quoted again and again by Srila Prabhupada. Yatatado mula nishechadena chipyanti tatskanda bhuto pashaka pranopahara chayatindiranim tataiva sarvahanamachuteja. Now, this is a verse that talks about, the last line talks about, in this way one can worship, verse number 431:14. Just as watering the root of a tree will nourish all the fruits and flowers and twigs and branches, just as feeding the stomach will nourish all of the senses. Similarly, by serving Achyuta, by worshipping Achyuta, you please and worship all the demigods. In other words, you don't have to get distracted into worshipping demigods for any material program that you have. Simply worship Krsna, and everything will be taken care of. That's a very important. That was text 14. And then he goes on, and he came to the end there, and he gave them some advice. By showing mercy to all living entities, being satisfied somehow or other, and controlling the senses from sense enjoyment, one can very quickly satisfy the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And so that's one of his instructions. Then the last three we've been reading, the ones that are hardest to chant, The first one, Apahata Sakalaishana Malatman, Avidadam Edet Bhavanopohutaha. Nija Jana Vashagattum Atmanoyan Nasadati Chiddhamanakshadak. So this is about the importance of always calling out to the Lord with deep feeling. Prabhupada gives the translation here. Being completely cleansed of all material desires, the devotees are freed from all mental contamination. Thus they can always think of the Lord constantly and address Him very feelingly. The Supreme Personality of Godhead, knowing Himself to be controlled by His devotees, does not leave them for a second, just as the sky overhead never becomes invisible. So this principle of working to purify ourselves of all material desires and chant purely. Chant purely. We're not chanting for liberation. We're not chanting certainly for anything material. We're chanting simply so that Krishna will take us back into the spiritual and engage us in the service for eternity. Even if we don't go back, we're praying for pure devotional service, for love for Krishna. And that's what's described here. And I love this phrase, Edita Bhavanopahuta. I think I mentioned that in the class. This word edita means ever increasing emotion of feeling to chant the holy name. We're practicing every day, chanting Hare Krishna, both in japa and in kirtan. And what's the essence of it is full absorption and chanting with from the heart for that one and only benediction, to be engaged in your service, to be purified of all tinges of material desire, and to come to that point. And that's the essence of that verse, that famous verse. Trina rapi suni chena todo rapi sahishnana. Amanina manadena kirtani sadahari. Kirtani sadahari. That to feel oneself really as insignificant as a straw on the street. And what happens to the straw on the street? He gets trampled. In other words, it's a very insignificant position and kind of a dangerous position, which is what we're on in the material world. So that's the first thing. And therefore, one has to be tolerant. You're tolerant of all of these threefold miseries. You have to be tolerant of we've just been reading at the end of the 12th chapter in the Gita. This word tulya, this tulyama, tulya comes in, to be equipoised in praise and blame, to be sama, to be equipoised in happiness and distress. These things happen in the material world. All the sincerest devotees, you see they went through such austerities. They were attacked. Prabhupada often invokes Jesus Christ having met crucifixion for preaching, because he was didn't just go off into the desert and chant his mantras or whatever, prayers. But he stayed among the people and he was preaching, and despite the fact that they didn't want him to, and he was attacked and so-called killed. But so what are they describing here? The qualities of the sadhu that Kapila Dev describes. Tatikshava, karunika. Right? Any book distributor will tell you, you've got to have those two qualities. You got to be merciful just to go out, and when you go out, you got to be tolerant. Maintain your enthusiasm, and what was it? You told that story of somebody was yelling at you in your face in the airport, and you weren't reacting. You weren't like trying to punch him in the nose or anything. And a third guy saw that, he was impressed, came by, bought a book, right? Amazing stories. So that's that quality of tolerance, feeling oneself lower, and being tolerant in the tree, and then hey, I got it made. I'm the most humble. I'm the most tolerant. No, amanina amanadena. Not wanting any praise from oneself, always giving it to others, and especially to those who are most exalted devotees. That you can see, this is exactly counteracting the false of the false ego. The false ego is centered on these two principles: me and mine. Right? I am the controller. I'm the master. Isharoham aham bhogi. Sound familiar? This is the demon's mantra that Krishna imitates in the Bhagavad Gita. I am the controller. I'm the master. I'm the enjoyer. No one is as powerful as me. That's exactly the opposite of the mood we have to have when we chant. It says, I'm completely helpless and dependent on the Lord. I have to cry out just like a child for protection. You know, even you know, the greatest devotees, as Prabhupada showed by himself, they're always doing that. You know, what are you praying for? They ask Prabhupada. He's in front of the deities. You know, praying that I won't fall down. But Prabhupada, you can't fall down. That's because I'm always praying. They're always calling out, feeling themselves to be fallen, and that's what we really are. So what happens here in Narada Muni is, describing this highest level. Always they're calling out, purified of material desires, calling out with great emotion, and they bring Krishna under control. This idea, it's like, wait a minute, isn't that kind? We want to be controlled. How could we're not desiring to bring Krishna under control, but he voluntarily does that out of his love. He wants to be controlled by those who love him the most. That's why he loves, being controlled by Mother Yashoda. The ideal of Vatsalya Ras. She is just overwhelming love. The love is symbolized, you will, or a symptom of it is the flowing of the breast milk. There's this beautiful verse, if you let me share, from the Vidagdha Madhava, describing this. Krishna comes before her. He's crawling. That little murti that's probably in about 200 million homes in India, of little Gopal, Krishna on all fours. He's not walking yet. He's got a little butterball. And he's smiling, and he's looking up and he's crawling, right? So this is what she sees. It says, Konata kanaka kinkani kalapam smidnamukamudruna nasikagra kadaditanavanita pinnamange agre taniyam abekshanananda patni. This is Rupa Goswami describing Vatsalya Ras in the Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu. That stage of Vatsalya Ras, the different stages as he grows up. So here is this stage, and he's Konata kanaka kinkani kalapam. You can just hear the poetry. His golden. What is he wearing? He's wearing a little string of golden bells, and a pearl on his nose. That's it. And so he's got this butterball. So he's crawling toward her, and these beautiful, golden tinkling ankle bells are sweet, very sweetly tinkling as he's crawling. Kinkani kalapam. Smita Mukham, and his smiling face. He's smiling at his mother, Smita Mukham Ujjvala Nasika, and an effulgent pearl is affixed to the tip of his nose. He's got this fresh butterball in his hand, and Mother Yashoda sees him, and the wonderful phrase, Nanda Nanda Patni. Nanda Patni is Yashoda. She's the wife of Nanda. So Nananda means delighting him, delighting her, causing bliss. So the verse from Vidagdha Madhava describes her reaction. Aha kamala gander at soundaya vrinde vinahita nayanayam ton mukendo mukunda kucha kalasham mukabhyamam badaknopa mambatava mohandati harshad varshadi chiradaram. It's very poetic. Ahaha. This is a word in Sanskrit that means what it sounds like. Oh, how wonderful. Emotions. Kamala gander. Oh. So a third gopi is watching this and is glorifying Krishna, describing Krishna. You who have a fragrance of a lotus flower, Kamala Gandhir. Atra, here, Saundarya Vrinde, the sum total of all beauties. Saundarya Vinadhi Nayanayam, she's placed her gaze upon you, she's gazing upon you. Twan Mukendo Mukun, upon your beautiful moon-like face. And as soon as she does that, from her breast start pouring all this milk. Kuchakalasha Makabamam is soaking her sari. Muharati Harshad Varshati Chiradaram. So there's a Varshati, means a rain of this milk, because she's Harshati, she's completely overwhelmed with love and ecstasy by seeing him. So this is Krishna's desire to be controlled. In other words, he loves that more than, as he describes in the 4th chapter, Adi Leela. All of the, hymns, the official hymns, offered by the Brahmins, very pious Brahmins, since time immemorial to Narayan, don't please you as much as your mother binding you. This is what he relishes. Rasovai Saha. He's always after that sweet rasa, pure love, you know. So that's why he says, Nija Janabasa Gatvam, by calling out to him in this, deeping in emotion, in the mood of helplessness, we bring him, Krishna, under control. He knows he's under control. And he never leaves. He never leaves us. In other words, you'll always feel his presence there, and you'll always see him. And he's, so this is near the end here. He's describing this. This is Narada Muni's instructions to the Pracetas. And Krishna becomes dependent on his devotees. So now, after this, then it's described that in the next few verses. This is a few verses before the one we're reading. How they're what did we just read today? Hearing that from Narada's mouth, the glories of the Lord, which vanquish all ill fortune of the world, the Pracetas also became attached to the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Meditating on his lotus feet, they advanced to the ultimate destination. So the whole, one of the lessons of all of this is that how fortunate we are, because we don't have to, we're not asked to go and meditate for 10,000 years underwater. Krishna makes it, Prabhupada makes it very clear in the Bhagavad Gita that even the meditation chapter 6 in the Bhagavad Gita is not really meant for us. Arjuna rejects it. It's not possible in this age. We're meant to follow the program that has been chalked out for us by Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and his sincere followers. In other words, it's a process that's custom made for us. I always think of this like judo. You know judo? When I was a kid, I was thinking I'm going to learn judo. I never did, but I would study it. And it's always like you use the strength of the guy who's attacking you against him, right? You kind of step back, pull the arm forward, and his own strength and momentum carries him forward. And you can flip him over, something like that. Glenn can explain later over breakfast. I think he knows these arts. But the point is that we're very unqualified, right? For the most part, we don't live very long. We're always misguided. We're unfortunate, always disturbed. So how are we going to practice yoga? So Lord Krishna comes as Lord Chaitanya, and we have an advantage in this age over previous ages. We're already so fallen and so disqualified. If we just get the right association and take up the right process, we can cut through all of this, within one lifetime. If we could just learn how to chant purely, which is not easy, but it's possible. And we really realize and understand how helpless we are and how unqualified. And just look at this age we're in. I mean, this whole pandemic has really kind of, in one sense, there's a real silver lining to it. Because not only the devotees, but everyone is seeing the unsurety of material life, of life in general. We thought we had it together. New York looks like it's going to fall into the ocean. I mean, that whole city people have moved out. There's nobody in those big buildings anymore. They're all working at home, and they say, why do we have to commute and fight all that? Let me stay home. And in other words, all the things that seem to be, they're not, but they seem to be steady and, eternal, they're not. People have been realizing. And so, those who are fortunate, those who have some touch with Krishna consciousness, some of them got a lot more serious about Krishna consciousness. Suddenly we have a whole bunch of wonderful, wonderful bhaktas joining. Partially because I think, the mood is that, my God, things are crazy, It's always that way. It's always that way. Material life is always like a drop on a lotus leaf. It could fall right off at any moment. But the illusion is, you get some money, you get a position, a family, this and that, things seem to, and then finally, at the time of death, or as you're confronting death, you realize, oh, this is all illusion, but it's too late. You can't practice by that time. So we're in a situation where we're not Brahmins, and we're not trained, and there's all kinds of impurities. But we have been given, the Lord Chaitanya and his sincere followers, especially Srila Prabhupada, took the trouble to actually take this around the world And we have this temple, and we have these books, and the sound vibration, the internet. You can hear lectures by leading, devotees all over the movement. It's a time when we can really take advantage of what we have and try to attain, Bhagavat Sangi Sangasya. That's what's most valuable. What does it mean? A Sangi is someone who's associating. Now we can be three modes of nature Sangis, most people are. But Bhagavat Sangi is a pure devotee, always associating with the Supreme Personality of Godhead, in any condition. Prabhupada's walking in Broadway, Times Square, all kinds of crazy movie houses and people on the street. He's still Bhagavat Sangi. He's got his bag of Bhagavatams looking for bookstores, and trying to, or wherever he is. So the great devotees, you carry Krishna with you. He's always with you, but you realize he's with you and you're protected. So Bhagavat Sangi's association with such a devotee, that's the high point, can give us the seed of devotion, which if we're receptive and sincere, we can actually water by hearing and chanting. That's the key sadhana. Hearing and then repeating, hearing and chanting, and associating with other devotees and sharing that vibration. That's how we can stay, Krishna conscious and enthused. And then when it comes time for festivals and kirtans and everything else, we're fully benefiting, from it and just getting swept up in the ecstasy. I remember when we had this first of those flower festivals. I think it was the 45th anniversary of the installation of the deities some years ago. I don't know if you were here at that time, Raj. But there was... we've had a lot of festivals. I was standing in the back here, and I was watching all these enthusiastic pujaris on the altar. There was two, I think, on each side, and they were throwing the petals. Until they were building up on the altar, and then they started throwing them out into the audience, and it was just such a wonderful affair, right here in the middle of Kali Yuga, in the middle of Pacific Beach. And those, that's what Krishna consciousness is. Prabhupada set up this movement so that it's meant to be a festival every morning and evening. The morning program, the evening program. And then periodically bigger festivals, taken out, Ratha Yatra. That was from almost near the beginning, 1967 in San Francisco. Now they're all over the country, they're starting to come back after this crazy pandemic. But that's Lord Chaitanya's mercy. That's Prabhupada's mercy having done that, and we can stay on that enthusiastic platform if we are careful to not let these material desires grow up again. That's the first line of that verse, first of the three concluding verses of Narada Muni. All completely pure purified of material desires. Then, when you chant, you're chanting with ever-increasing emotion and love for Krishna. So, chanting helps you become purified of desires. Chanting in a contaminated state. Whatever we do, we have to keep chanting. Whether we offend or not. Don't stop chanting. Now, the problem is, if you're not careful, you're not strict in the sadhana, and you commit offenses, then you lose your impetus for chanting, your enthusiasm. Krishna will take that away. So it's a science, and that's another great value of association, that we pick up, the qualities of those we associate with. And when we're fortunate, the ashram life is ideal, but there's so much opportunity for association now, directly and through the internet. The main thing is to be able to hear, and we can also see often now, deities and parakrams. So it's the other side of the internet. The internet is, the very beginning of the second canto, where Sukadeva Goswami is answering Parikshit Maharaj's main question: what should one do? What should one hear as death approaches? And it's a very good question. Bodhiyanashate prashna kuto loka hitang nipa, O king. That the answers to these questions benefits both the speaker and the hearer and those who listen in, But there are thousands and thousands of subject matters for hearing by the materialists, which have nothing to do with Krishna, which is deepen our involvement in Maya. And then he goes on to explain the condition of the conditioned souls. So those topics for hearing and also seeing are also anywhere. You know, practically your destiny is formed now by which buttons you push on your phone, on your computer. You know, what are you going to hear? What are you going to think about? You know, there's a world out there. I'm telling you, it's such a dangerous situation for those who don't have any kind of instruction, it's transcendental instruction. I mean, I remember when we grew up. You know, I think I'm a little older than you, but it's like, for me it was 50s and 60s, late 50s and 60s when I came of age, you know. You know, not a drop of transcendental knowledge, nothing, you know, atheism. So I was a normal kid. And you get to be 12, 13, you know, you start thinking of girls, you know. So, if you want to, you can try to get the magazine. It used to be Playboy magazine, you know. And they wouldn't sell it to kids our age, you know. But maybe we could, you know, a friend of a friend, you know, could see it, you know, oh, wow, you know. But it was nothing like today. These kids, they all have their phones, and the phone is a gateway to the most abominable images and things you could imagine. Isn't it like it's a horror show out there? And that's so contaminating, that business. And it makes it... And anyway, it's the modes of ignorance and passion. And as soon as the ignorance becomes so prominent, violence, you know, becomes more prominent. So this is the downside. I mean, there's so many downsides to this culture. It's true, though, that, you know, if you press the right buttons, you know, there's, you know, Radha Govinda in New York, or there's Radha Madhava in Mayapur. You can do that too. So it's all depending on the choice you have. But if you're just under the control of modes of nature, it's such a difficult time. So we are in the business. Prabhupada is in the business of chanting and finding hearers. You know, even if there's no hearers, he's still going to chant. He's going to write those books, right? He's writing the books practically alone. That was his duty. You know, that's what he felt, his mission. And he came to America and he started this movement, and he found some willing listeners, and everything grew from that. So the whole thing keys on the quality of our chanting and hearing. You know, to really, that's why I always try to stress, I pointed out, I think last night, just to contemplate the mercy that Prabhupada had to take the trouble to provide all of these transliterations and word-by-word meanings, so that we could, you know, experience the power of the Sanskrit and the meaning as well, and see how it's authorized. It comes in the translation, comes from those, you know, like that. It adds tremendous authority to the books. You'll find so many translations, you know. Oftentimes they don't provide any Sanskrit, no transliteration, nothing else. You know, just a translation and very little commentary. And there's so many of those Bhagavad Gitas floating around, you know, before Prabhupada even came. And as he pointed out, nobody became a devotee, you know. You can never figure it out yourself. But when he carefully explained it, especially the unabridged, when it came out in 1972, I have a picture of the first, probably getting the first book, you know. Oh, he's so blissful, he's smiling from ear to ear, you know. So we have such a wealth now, you know, the Veda base. It's free. I mean, when we first got it, you had to, you know, have the right computer, and you had to pay $100, and now more than that. Now you just key in the thing, you download it. You know, access to everything. So we have a great opportunity to absorb ourselves in the glories of the Lord, associate with devotees, hear, purify our hearing, become fixed in devotional service. And who knows, we should aspire for getting out of this material world, you know, in this lifetime. And, you know, of course, ultimately you say we just pray for pure devotion. But probably, you know, I think I counted 700 times he used that phrase, go back home, back to Godhead. You know, that was a real inducement. So that's there, desire to be with Krishna and engage in our original lost service to him and have our original form. We know about that, and that's also a great aspiration we should acquire. But the point is, we have the opportunity. We should take advantage of it. We don't know how much time we'll have this opportunity. It could be a tsunami tomorrow, right outside here. You know, this is the actual nature of where we're living in the material world. So these pastimes, this whole fourth canto, so many wonderful pastimes, Dhruva Maharaj, and then and Daksha, and now this whole analogy or allegory rather, and culminating now in the instructions and the success of these Pracetas. All right, I'm going to stop there. If there's any local questions or comments, we can entertain those first. I'm a little rusty on giving class, so forgive me if there's some rough edges. I'll try to improve next time.
Thank you. It was a real pleasure hearing you again.
Hare Krishna, Maharaj.
Do you mind repeating, if you can remember, what you said was the consciousness of the Pracetas when they were involved in their household duties and then left?
Well, this is what they said. They said, due to our being, you want me to try to find the verse?
No, you've got the essence of it.
I'm sorry?
You have the essence of it.
Yeah. That due to our being entangled in family life and all these things, we almost forgot the instructions of Lord Shiva and Narada Muni. That's it.
And later on in the class, you described the mood of all the pure devotees in their humility, praying never to fall into Maya. They think they are, totally susceptible, etc. Based on the first verse of this chapter, I think we can safely say that was what we're hearing or seeing in the Pracetas is their humility. Because the great sage Maitreya continued after that, meaning getting the darshan of Narayan and his blessings. The Pracetas lived at home for thousands of years and developed perfect knowledge and spiritual consciousness. At last, they remembered the blessings of the Supreme Personality of Godhead and left home, putting their wife in charge of a perfect son. So they were Krishna conscious throughout and knew, now it's time. And
so they're taking mercy. Right. So this is a symptom of their being humble and describing themselves as very fallen, and we find that. I was just reading Prabhupada's address in the 1930s. It was 1936, and Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati, was his appearance day in Bombay, and he's describing at the end with all the humility at my command, and I'm certainly unqualified. And that prayer, what is that? Summing crores of births, right. So this is a symptom of their humility. And they did their duty, and then they got all the blessing. They got Narayan's darshan and his instructions, and they did they did what they were supposed to do. They to facilitate the universe becoming full of praja. And now finally at the end there they get the greatest association you can have. There's Narada Muni comes down, so it's ideal.
Can I also put a little emphasis on what you were talking about, the phone and its connection to the internet?
Yeah.
Even with the sadhakas, not just the non-devotees, you're emphasizing what button you push leads you to, your degradation or your purification.
Yeah.
The way they've designed these things, the people who have designed it, they've psychologically addicted sadhakas also, to whereby you think it's an integral part of you, a necessary part of you. And a way you might test that is how quickly in the day do you pick up that thing to connect somehow or other with what is within your phone. And then when you lose or think you lost your phone, what does your emotions, what do you go through? So we have to be you're right. It's such a dangerous thing, even if you are simply using it in Krishna service, because it's addictive. They've made it.
Yeah. They've done studies, especially they've done studies with young people, like as college students. We'll give you $100 if you loan us your phone for a day, and can we test it? What's your mood? After that. And after like a few hours, the heart starts beating faster. The FOMO sets in, fear of missing out. Is a FOMO thing, right? And it's just like that. It's very addictive, Now, so that's why I encourage memorization, because if you have the if you have things in your head, you may not have your phone and everything, but you can still stay enlivened. We always have Hare Krishna, obviously, but there's like those verses. There's so much beauty in these things, and we've been given, And Srila Prabhupada, when he left L.A. in 1970, after 8 months, he was there in one place, and he was planning to stay. He said, I can ride here. He had devotees come. He was training them up, But I won't go into it. It became not auspicious for him to stay. He felt he wanted to leave urgently. So he went to Japan, and he had a few devotees with him, 1 or 2 sannyasis and some others, I forget who. And he was staying there. There was a center, I don't know if it was in Tokyo or somewhere. And so he was giving class on the second canto. And in those days, he was so eager to get the book out that we printed chapter by chapter. It was like, you remember that? There were these softback chapters, chapter 2, chapter 3. So I think it was the beginning of the second canto. I have the lecture if you're interested. So he's having everyone memorize the verse each day, And then the second day they had to recite 2 of the verses, 3 of the verses. So after when they had there's 8 or 9 verses, I will have a whole lesson there, from Shukadev to Purikit, and so they were chanting it all. The class took a couple of hours. And there are quotes in there about how much he is emphasizing memorizing verses, how important it is, how the Sanskrit, is so important. In the first book of famous verses that came out, I think Rohini Nandana from Britain, do you remember him? Yeah. He was totally into it, and he did all this research. This is before all the computers. He was looking in the books and the transcripts and show where did Prabhupada quote the verse from and this and that. And then he came all the way to Miami because he heard I was into shlokas, and he came to America. He visited Miami. And he came down there, and he showed me what he had. He said, yeah, but what about this one? He said, oh, thank you so much. It was worse than coming all the way to Miami just to get this verse. But he had organized them by subject. And also he had at the beginning, why memorize verses? What's the reason, Yeah, it's wonderful. To give more authority when we speak, to enjoy with your godbrothers, God sisters, and transcendental enjoyment. There's a whole list there, of reason for, because unless you're motivated, you're not going to do anything. So he gives us all this motivation. So that's something that we can cultivate. We can start out, as we've already memorized, Namaham Vishnu Padaya Krishna Pasaya Bhutale, right? So we all memorized, and Bhagavad Gita. Prabhupada is very, was into it. The reason why did we get into it? Because he'd listen to his lectures. He'd always be quoting verses. I remember so many index cards we had, and you'd have the transliteration, and in between the lines you'd put the synonyms, and you'd get like this. So it's a great way of remembering Krishna, disciplining the mind, and sharing, nectar. So it's I'm here if you want to learn some verses. I have Dravida's 6 easy principles of memorizing. I worked it out. Okay. Vijay Krishna.
Hare Krishna, Dravida Prabhu, my obeisances.
Obeisance.
May I?
Please.
Prabhu, the translation says that the glories of the Lord are capable of vanquishing all the ill fortune of the world. And if I may, as a brief introduction to my question related to this quote, I must say the following. Lord Chaitanya's movement has been active for already 535 years, including the years related to the ISKCON movement established by Srila Prabhupada. And in the 60s, 70s, and still this is going on. The Hare Krishnas were advertising themselves as the only absolute positive alternative in relation to changing the world for the better. But many people in the present days say that the Hare Krishnas are not fulfilling their promise because, and this is just one of the statistics, at every 40 seconds in this world, a person commits suicide nowadays. So my question is as follows. In what measure is Lord Chaitanya's movement powerful enough in order to vanquishing all the ill fortune of the world?
Well, that's pretty depressing. Well, the idea is that each generation of followers has the mantle, if you will, to spread the movement in an authorized way, according to our acharyas, and to preach as sincerely as we can, to distribute as many books and make as many devotees and do all the things that Prabhupada showed how to do and to set up. As far as how that effect is going to happen, and how it's already happened to some degree. I mean, you have to think, where would we be if there was no Hare Krishna movement? It's as bad as it is now, In other words, you have to think along those lines also. But the power is obviously there, and we've experienced it in our own lives. The reformation of a life, a sinful life, people feel saved by it all the time. There are thousands of stories. I could give one story myself, a very intimate story about myself. But people have the free will, and just like you find in Lord Krishna's Leela, that for a long time it seemed hopeless. You had this Kamsa, he was sending out all these powerful demons, and the beginning of the 10th canto, he took over this, he took over that. People, the different dynasties were taking shelter here and there. It looked pretty bleak. You had this powerful ally, Jarasandha was, So even when Krishna was on the planet, it looked hopeless, and it looked like the good guys were outnumbered, But of course, Krishna was there, and ultimately the battle of Kurukshetra was fought, and Yudhishthira came to the throne. So the idea is that the glories of the Lord vanquish all the ill fortune of the world. We can experience it personally. No one can argue against that. Personally, we can experience how our own ill fortune has been vanquished, if the more sincerely we practice. And there are so many strategies for spreading the movement and bringing others in and giving it. But everyone has the free will. In other words, it may not be obvious how that's happening, but it can happen very swiftly all of a sudden. Just like I said. How this pandemic has a silver lining, because people are getting serious about getting saved, and then they're doing a little Krishna consciousness. Yeah. Now I think I better take it seriously, So we can't see that. Just like Prabhupada got on that boat, he didn't know exactly what was going to happen. He was just doing the best he could, and with all of his energy, and leaving the result up to Krishna. That's our success, Vijay. And we can't try to map out, well, all right, now it hasn't succeeded. It's been 55 years. Where's the success? There was a time when Lord Chaitanya's movement was eclipsed entirely. When there were always devotees practicing, but there were all of these upasampradayas, and the people thought that Chaitanya Vaishnavism was some excuse for lascivity and stuff like that. It would be corrupted. Bhaktivinoda Thakur, one of his greatest victories, was raising that up and establishing Lord Chaitanya's actual movement as it was. And Bhaktisiddhanta carried that forward. Prabhupada carried it forward. Just the opposite. 4 regular principles. None of this. Pretending to be Krishna and Radha and all that business. So it even may get covered over even after Lord Chaitanya's time. What to speak of now? It may seem obvious. So. That's the power is there. It's up to us to carry it forward, do our best, and leave the result up to Krishna. We have a comment.
Prabhu, wonderful answer to my question. Thank you very much.
Hare Krishna. And one final word from Balaramji.
I just have a comment in relation to that. You're talking how Lord Chaitanya's movement became completely eclipsed. And,
almost completely.
Yeah, almost. And how Bhaktivinoda Thakur, he couldn't even find a Chaitanya Charitamrita.
Yeah.
I mean, imagine if we couldn't find a Chaitanya Charitamrita after searching. He was searching.
Yeah.
But now, I mean, we have so many Chaitanya Charitamritas that are being distributed throughout the world. And I was just thinking how Ratnabhushan Prabhu, he told me some time ago, because he makes those Balaram Mridangas.
Yeah.
He was making a big order for devotees in China.
Uh-huh.
It was like, I don't know, 300 Mridangas, something like that. Huge order.
That is big.
So, anyways, so there's chantings going on.
Yeah. All right, on that note, very auspicious note, all glory to Srila Prabhupada. Thank you. Hari Bol. Oh, God. Hari Bol, my friend.
Can I get this to sign? Please.